Welcome back. So let's go back to one of our top stories. We've been reporting that the new budget will now be tabled on the 21st of May. This is after two previous attempts have failed. The Western Cape High Court set aside Parliament's adoption of the fiscal framework and also halted a 0.5 percentage point VAT hike. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana today said the new budget will focus on growing the economy. Section 27's budget researcher Matshidiso Lencoasa joins us to give us their reaction. Matshidiso, welcome back. We've had this discussion a few times now, haven't we? If I hear people talking about budget 3.0, here we go. And now the minister today announcing the date, the 21st of May. And one of the things that we saw was even the DG at great pains to us to explain how they still have time. I mean, you hear of the date set, the timelines, and is there a concern as Section 27 looks on?
Yeah. Thank you once again for having us. So, yeah, it was quite an interesting briefing and really reflected what a crazy time that we're in with this budget that just keeps on going on. Yeah. But I think our overall reflections on that is that, yes, on the one hand, it does seem like a bit of short notice, but because there have been alternatives and because we've actually been deliberating the budget maybe the way that we should have from the start, I think that Treasury might be in a better position to come back with a better informed budget, a budget that really does reflect or better reflect the will of the people, but also actually is better positioned to help grow our economy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be keen to take a couple steps back then with you and say, all right, so we did see the announcement by the Western Cape High Court with that order of the court essentially saying, well, the parties have sat down and agreement has been reached, right? And there is the finalization of the reversal of that fiscal framework and the VAT increase. Was that something that, in your view, what the vulnerable sectors really needed, a reversal of that VAT?
Sure. So I think most people in this country would welcome that, because our view with the VAT increase is that, yes, we really have been calling on government to improve spending, so to invest in quality basic education and healthcare services. But the way that we fund that is also really important, because if you're proposing a VAT increase, which is what they had done, what it means is that there's there's less money in people's pockets, and so they don't participate in the economy as meaningfully as possible, which doesn't actually grow the economy in the way that I think government would have liked. I think it would have been quite ambitious, in addition to the impact that it has on economically vulnerable households. So even though, you know, on the surface we do want increases towards expenditure towards basic education and healthcare services, but the way that we fund it is crucial that it has to be done in a way that actually advances the needs and the will of the people of our country.
Yeah, there's of course the fact that the finance minister is saying that, well, in this period, as we lock down the next budget, and hopefully that will take place by on the 21st of May when it is tabled, and whatever will follow after that. He is at pains to explain, though, that budget spend does not stop at this time. But at the same time, he raises issues around challenges within the health sector. So let's talk about that. I mean, are there impacts to, say, health? The minister also talking about how in some areas doctors simply have not been paid, and there are those challenges.
Absolutely. And what I guess the minister probably would not have reflected on right now is that these challenges are as a result of years of underfunding in the healthcare system. So on the surface, I think many people in this country would hear the terminology of there are billions that are being allocated. But when you actually look at the numbers, you see that there's been a defunding in our public healthcare system, which means that there's fewer resources available to hire doctors, to pay doctors. And so we've seen reports of newly qualified doctors sitting at home, and what you're referring to about doctors who haven't been paid yet. This is concerning. I mean, this also extends to nurses and community healthcare workers, and in a context where US aid funding has been pulled out, and just an ever-changing geopolitical context. And I think with all of this being said, it just shows how crucial it is for National Treasury to not be thinking instead of a VAT increase, it means that there needs to be severe cuts to to social spending. Actually, we need an alternative. We need a budget that actually works for our country, that goes beyond the rhetoric of we want to grow the economy, but what actually does so and actually invests in our health system and providing quality healthcare services for people in this country. So it is concerning what has happened, but we hope that through all this expensive exercise of postponing budgets could be a lesson in course correction, and that the decision makers regarding the budget will really take to heart what's going on for the people in our country.
It's interesting. You called it an expensive exercise, right? And it is. That's the reality of it. And as some sectors look on, they're concerned about, where that money is going to come from. And perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on that. But let's talk education as well. I mean, part of what you'd want this budget to be able to do is to address the challenges within the space of education, where we're losing teachers. We're already bleeding teachers out of demotivation, and then as a result of defunding, we're also unable to employ or create even more posts for teachers. So what does Budget 3.0 need to get right?
Absolutely. So basic education is one that, is crucial, because last year there were reduction of teacher posts, and what we're seeing is that has worsened overcrowding in schools across the country, especially schools that are in more impoverished communities. And, investing in education is really investing in the future of people in this country. And so for years, we've been seeing a defunding towards education. But like I said in the previous answer, is that similar to healthcare, if you are actually to invest in and better position our budget to really serve our country today, but also over the long term, we really need to be looking at how we spend our money in education and how we invest in our education system. So we would love to see an investment in not just the public sector wage bill regarding teachers, but also increasing the number of teachers that are in the public education system. We're looking to see that there's a massive investment in infrastructure, eradication of pit latrines. I mean, the minister was celebrating nearly 100%, but we're not quite there yet, and this could be an opportunity to do that. So we're really hoping, there's also the context of the Bella Acts that has been signed off, and so there are pressing education needs in this country that require education investments, and it is important that our budget takes heed to that, and National Treasury does that, but also that we invest in, and how we spend or how we fund this is done in a way that isn't going to worsen the lives of the most economically vulnerable in the country in the form of similar taxes like a VAT increase.
Yeah. And then the minister and his team, obviously, once again tasked with going back to look at that pie and deciding how they're going to slice it. Suggestions on what he can and should do.
Sure. So as part of the Budget Justice Coalition, we were formed in 2018 at the initial VAT increase. And the whole point of it was to say that it doesn't have to be either regressive taxes or spending cuts. We can actually create a budget that actually, that goes beyond the rhetoric of economic growth and prosperity, but actually does position our economy to grow and create jobs. So, there's overall answers of, our economic policy needs to work together. Our industrial policy needs to actually spur economic growth, or else we wouldn't have the problems that we do now. But also in the meantime, the VAT increase was it was the major point of contention, but it would only generate 0.5% VAT increase, would generate 11.5 billion rand, which often accounting for zero rating on essential goods and services. And so that 11 billion, when you also account for SARS has raised a record amount of revenue, so 8.8 billion or 8.8 billion, if I'm not mistaken, which is much more than what they had expected. I think that it does start to show that the gap is actually much smaller than what is being presented. And so, yes, it is important for Treasury to be fiscally responsible, but that gap, after accounting for all of that, it is something that we can actually fund. We're looking at, the government has a lot of reserves that are just sitting there and are not actually being utilized for the betterment of the lives of people in this country, like the government pension fund or the gold foreign exchange reserve. Perhaps those reserves could, as a stopgap measure while we begin to think about how do we strengthen our tax collection system so that we can actually collect sufficient revenue and overcome tax evasion. Those are some of the proposals we've put forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you crunch the numbers, you talk about after the 0.5 percentage point VAT hike, that would generate about 11 billion rand, but we're talking about a 75 billion rand shortfall. So I mean, it's a big discrepancy about what that VAT can do and really what's necessary. Talk to us about how civil society needs to engage in this process, because for the next few weeks, we will very much be watching the political wrangling of all of it. And there's a sense that there needs to be a louder voice, I think, or a voice that is heard more and more from the civil society and from the ground.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the major wins for us as civil society is that National Treasury has made a commitment to restore public participation in the budget so that we can avoid the errors of this budget that didn't even get tabled. So in September, so at the budget conceptualization rather than reaction. And so that's an important opportunity for not just civil society, but ordinary, everyday South Africans to make their voice be heard. And I think what is also really important for us, in addition to public participation, is to continue to advocate and to show and provide evidence of the impact of the different of the budget to public officials who are making decisions like this, because what we have seen, even though it is important that we've been talking about the budget as a country, we welcome this, but at the same time, we also know that one of the challenges is that there's been a politicization of the budget of who won, who lost, and really it should be about the people of our country. And so in an effort to, yes, the politics are important, but in an effort to ensure that it is grounded in the experience of people in the country, I do really urge civil society, but also people in our country to continue to monitor the budget and not really check out, because it is our money at the end of the day.
Yeah. Matshidiso Lencoasa, they're reminding us of what's important as we get closer to the 21st of May. And of course, that's when the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, will be tabling the new revised budget after the finalization of that VAT increase reversal. Matshidiso Lencoasa is a budget researcher at Section 27.